He slid the papers across the polished table without even looking at me. His pen clicked twice, once to uncap it, once to sign, and just like that, 7 years of marriage became a line at the bottom of a legal form. "I'm sorry it had to end like this," he said, eyes still on the documents. "But it's better to be honest now than drag this out." Honest. That word tasted like rust in my mouth. I sat perfectly still, the edge of my nails pressing into the flesh of my palms beneath the table. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I smiled. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "Honesty is better."
He looked up at that.
Briefly, almost like he was trying to decide if I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. Not exactly. He cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair, the kind of stretch men do when they think the hard part's over. "I want you to know I'm not trying to cheat you out of anything, but there's not much left." He said it like a confession, like a man admitting he'd already lost the war. The last 2 investments collapsed. The rest went into debt recovery. He laughed under his breath, a dry, hollow sound. "I'm already broke, Yara." Broke. That was the word that cracked something inside me. Not because it was new, but because it was familiar.
He was broke now.
But I remembered when I was. When I packed his lunches while skipping mine. When I smiled through bank overdraft notifications and his late-night meetings that always smelled like perfume. When I stood behind him at cocktail parties like wallpaper, pleasant, silent, decorative. "I see," I said, folding my hands in front of me. He leaned forward, almost grateful. "I just want to get through this with dignity. No lawyers clawing at scraps. We walk away clean. Equal." I tilted my head. "Equal?" He nodded, mistaking my tone. 50-50. What's left, we split." I watched him for a moment. Watched the way his shoulders slouched now instead of squared. Watched how the lines around his mouth had deepened since the last time I studied him. Watched how sure he was that he'd finally beaten me into surrender with nothing but a signature. I leaned in slightly, just enough for my voice to sound intimate. "Of course," I said. 50-50 sounds fair." His eyes softened. He thought I was being graceful. He had no idea. I signed the papers with a flourish he didn't deserve. The pen glided smoothly, the ink pooling over my name. Yara Chen. Still his last name, for now.
He stood, relieved.
Offered his hand like we were business partners shaking on a clean deal. I took it. Firm. Unshaking. He didn't see the ghost of the woman he used to belittle looking back at him. He didn't see the empire I'd built behind his back. The name I used that wasn't his. The bank accounts in 5 different countries. The product line launching next month. The boardroom I chaired under a different signature. He saw a quiet ex-wife with nothing left. I saw a man who gave up too soon. When he walked out of that conference room, he thought he walked away with the win. But he didn't know. I stopped playing his game years ago. And now, he's broke. I'm just getting started. He said it like a confession, like something that might earn him pity if he softened his voice enough. "I'm broke," he told me. "You deserve to know the truth before we finalize everything. There's nothing left to take." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how certain he sounded. He really thought I didn't know. He really believed I was the kind of woman who would go through a divorce blindfolded, emotionally wrecked, clinging to a man who had already let go. But I had stopped loving him long before he stopped pretending to love me. I watched him from across the table, nodding like his words hurt me, like I was digesting them slowly, like I was still that girl who waited up until 2 in the morning, thinking he was working when he was really drinking champagne out of someone else's glass. "Thank you for being honest," I said softly. He nodded, grateful, self-satisfied. That was always his weakness. He needed to be the good guy, even when he wasn't. I remembered the months before the separation, the canceled credit cards, the late-night calls to his partner, the way he told me to trust the process when I asked about missing money, and then the day I overheard him on the phone telling someone, "She doesn't need to know anything. She's not part of this." That was the moment I stopped asking and started watching. I opened a new email, a new account, a new identity. I hired someone who used to clean up digital messes for corporate scandals and paid them to teach me how to disappear in plain sight. It wasn't cheap, but I could afford it, because while he was losing thousands chasing illusions, I was building something real. He thought I was still budgeting groceries while he gambled our savings. But I'd already moved the important money. My money. The money I'd quietly stashed from the side projects he never cared about: freelance writing, digital art, tutoring rich kids in Mandarin. He thought it was cute. A hobby. It wasn't a hobby. It was the seed. He had no idea how much it had grown. "You look tired," I said gently, studying the creases near his eyes, the slight slump of his shoulders. He sighed. "I haven't been sleeping. There's a lot on my plate. I bet. Like figuring out how to keep his offshore accounts hidden, or how to maintain his image while the wolves circled." "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, like I meant it. He looked touched. He really was so easy to manipulate. I had been married to him for 7 years. Long enough to know how to feed his ego, just enough to keep him blind. But I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. Just focused. Because while he was unraveling, I was already 10 steps ahead. He didn't know about the digital marketplace I built under an alias. The one that sold minimalist homeware designs I created at night after he went to bed. He didn't know about the app one co-developed with a friend in Singapore. The one that just secured series of funding and was quietly going viral among microbusinesses. He didn't know that 3 months before he asked for the divorce, I had legally changed my business identity, moved my investments to blockchain wallets, and signed with a discreet corporate lawyer who specialized in anonymity. He didn't know, and I wasn't going to tell him. Let him think I was still the wife who'd never understand his world. Let him believe he'd be remembered as the tragic husband who lost it all and still tried to leave with grace. He needed that illusion. But I had no interest in playing savior for a man who once told me, "You wouldn't survive without me." That was the last thing he ever said that truly motivated me. Now, as I signed the last page of our settlement and slid it toward him, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I was free. He looked at me like I'd surprised him somehow. Maybe he expected tears, a breakdown, maybe a plea to try again. But I had no words left for him. Only silence. Only peace. Only the thrill of knowing that while he stared at the ruins of what he built, I was already standing on the balcony of a tower he never even saw going up. It started with $50. $50 he forgot to notice, from a freelance job he thought was just something to keep me busy. A blog post I ghost wrote under someone else's name. He skimmed over it when I told him. Said, "Cute. You're learning." I smiled and let him think it was nothing. The first time I hit 300 in a month, I opened a second account. Separate bank. Separate name. Just in case. By the time I made 1,000 in a week, I knew it wasn't luck. It was leverage. And he didn't know I'd learned to use it. He was too busy chasing whatever came next, investments that made no sense, business trips that bled money, partnerships that looked more like playgrounds for overgrown boys trying to look important. Every time he came home with a new excuse, I nodded. Every time he left without asking where I was going, I didn't correct him. Because while he was spending our savings on bad deals and worse women, I was teaching myself how to build an empire. Quietly. Patiently. He always thought I was predictable. A background character. The good wife. He didn't see me staying up late in the office room we barely used, teaching myself how to code from YouTube tutorials. He didn't notice the design software on my laptop, or the hours I spent researching e-commerce logistics when he assumed I was watching dramas. He didn't care what I was doing as long as I didn't interfere. So, I didn't. I just built. My first online shop was simple: digital planners, minimal templates, custom icons. No brand. No identity. Just clean work, marketed through a whisper trail of niche forums and micro-communities. It caught, and I scaled it fast. I hired my first contractor through a freelancer site, a woman in another time zone who understood exactly what I needed and never asked questions. Then a second. Then someone to manage marketing. Then a virtual assistant. All under a business name he never saw on any of our joint statements. By the time he asked for the divorce, my company had made 6 figures in quiet profit. And I hadn't told a soul. He thought I was still on his payroll. Still swiping his card for groceries. Still looking at price tags like they meant something. But I'd stopped using his money 2 years ago. I kept the illusion because it gave me time. Because I knew it would come to this. The moment where he'd say, "There's nothing left." And I'd be able to smile and think, "Not for you." I reinvested almost everything. Diversified early. Bought web domains I didn't need, yet just to protect the future I hadn't fully imagined. Started a shell company. Registered the trademarks. Applied for patents. Every time he came home talking about the stress of running a business, I listened. And quietly ran mine better. I didn't need revenge. I needed options. Because I knew the day would come when he'd underestimate me one final time. And now that it had, I wasn't angry. I was ready. He never asked about the packages I signed for. The invoices I filed. The Zoom meetings I took with the door closed. He didn't ask why I stopped dressing for him and started dressing like someone with purpose. He just assumed I'd finally given up. Let him think that. Let him believe I went quietly. Let him live his post-divorce pity arc, telling his friends he had nothing and I didn't even fight for scraps. Because while he played the victim of his own choices, I was already preparing for my next product launch. Already building another revenue stream. Already studying how to enter international markets. He gave up on me. I built something he'll never be invited into again. And I did it with his blindfold tied around my eyes. He used to laugh at me in public. Not cruelly. No, he was too polished for that. He did it in that subtle way that passes for affection in toxic circles. A hand on my back, a tight-lipped smile, a teasing jab at how I always forgot the names of wine labels or didn't know which fork to use at a charity dinner. "She's more of a homebody," he'd say to his friends with an easy chuckle. "She's not really into business stuff." They'd laugh. I'd smile. And then I'd disappear behind another flute of champagne and a frozen face trained to look like admiration. He made it sound endearing. What he really meant was, "She's not a threat." He thought that was a compliment. I kept quiet because silence bought me space. And space bought me freedom. While he ordered another bottle to impress a table full of people who were all performing for each other, I was studying. I taught myself everything he thought I was too bored or too busy decorating the house to learn. I learned from the mistakes he made and the people he ignored. I followed investor accounts anonymously. I reverse-engineered the contracts he left lying on the kitchen table. I watched him brag about pitching to tech companies while I took online courses in data analytics with my headphones in. Every time he kissed me on the forehead before going out with someone he called a client, I stayed up and watched tutorials on how to scale a brand. He mocked me while I became a ghost. That was the irony. I became invisible so I could become untouchable. He once told a group of friends that I didn't have the stomach for business. That I was too gentle for the real world. I smiled when he said it, tilted my head, blinked just enough to look flattered. But I remember the exact day I stopped being gentle. It wasn't the first time he cheated. It wasn't the first time he lied. It was the day I realized he would never leave me, not because he loved me, but because he loved having someone beneath him. That was the day I stopped showing him what I was building. That was the day I erased myself from his world and started building my own. He didn't notice when I bought a second phone. Or when I opened a P.O. box under a different name. He didn't notice the late-night calls or the digital signatures or the subtle shift in my language. He didn't see me disappear because he never really looked at me in the first place. He saw his reflection, and I stopped trying to exist in it. I became quiet in the places he wanted noise, and loud in the places he never thought to check. When I launched my first product line, I did it through a brand name that sounded nothing like me. When I started getting press, I made sure I was never in the photos. When I got my first offer from a venture capital firm, I wore a wig and glasses to the pitch. He mocked me while I made myself untouchable. He thought I was stuck in his shadow. But I was just moving in silence. I was so far ahead of him by the time he decided to leave me that I didn't even need to play defense. Let him lie about the finances. Let him hide accounts. Let him sell off the last apartment he hadn't already mortgaged. Let him believe he was escaping a sinking ship. He had no idea I was already flying over him in a jet he helped pay for with his arrogance. I didn't want him to know. Not yet. Because when men like him finally see you, it's only so they can try to take you apart. And I had built something with steel and flame. He could laugh again if he wanted. But next time he did, it would be at the sound of my name echoing from a headline he didn't expect. And by then, it would be too late to undo the silence I used to set myself free. I watched him hide money like it was a game. Bank transfers in the middle of the night. A car sold to a friend for cash. A vacation property in his cousin's name. Every move slick, calculated, and messy beneath the surface. He thought he was playing chess. I let him think I was still playing checkers. The divorce mediator looked exhausted by the second session. My ex, soon-to-be ex, sat across the table in a dark blue suit, shoulders relaxed, voice smooth. He said all the right things, made himself sound noble. I'm not trying to be difficult, he told her, feigning sincerity. I just want to protect what little I have left. She nodded sympathetically, looked at me. And you, Mrs. Chin? I smiled. I want him to feel safe. He glanced over, unsure whether to be suspicious or flattered. I gave him nothing.
He played dirty.
And I played quiet. It wasn't forgiveness. It was strategy. He thought I hadn't noticed when he transferred our joint investment account into his name months ago. He thought I didn't know the stocks he sold were under my social security number. He thought the offshore account in the Cayman Islands was clever because I didn't go through his briefcase. I did.
Twice.
And I took photos. I never planned to use them. Because I didn't need to. I let him think he was winning. Let him panic over disappearing assets and minor audits. Let him sweat when his liquidity dried up and the payments on his lifestyle came knocking. Let him throw tantrums in empty rooms and blame market crashes, bad advice, and fake friends. I just kept showing up to court in neutral colors, hands folded, expression blank. I didn't want the house. Didn't want the car. Didn't want the vacation points or the framed certificates on his office wall. He couldn't understand it. To a man like him, value was always material. And if I wasn't fighting for things, I must be losing. He didn't know that everything I built wasn't in his name. Or his world.
It was better that way.
Because the moment I asked for nothing, he gave himself permission to gloat. At one point he leaned over the table during a break and said, I'm being generous, you know. I could have made this harder. I blinked at him, slowly. I know. He smiled. And I knew I'd already won. He was so focused on protecting the little he had left that he never once asked why I wasn't clawing for a piece of it. Why I sat there like a woman who had already let go. Because I had. Let go of the marriage. The illusion. The false narrative where he was the provider and I was the burden. He thought power was about keeping. I learned it was about walking away without needing to take. By the end of it, he was down to 3 assets and a bitter smile. He handed me the keys to the apartment like they were a favor, as if I should thank him for the crumbs. I know it's not much, he said, but it's something. It is, I said. Thank you. I moved out the next day. He didn't ask where I was going. And I didn't tell him that my new office was 3 floors above one of his former investors, one he'd lied to, who now worked with me. I didn't tell him that the client he tried to poach last year had already signed with my firm under a different name. I didn't tell him that the app he once laughed at, called Too Girly to Scale, had just closed a deal with a global distributor. I didn't need to say any of it, because he would see it, eventually. And when he did, I wanted him to remember that I didn't scream when he lied. I didn't beg when he stole. I didn't burn when he tried to bury me in nothing. I just smiled, and left him to fight over scraps he thought I cared about, while I sat quietly at the head of something he never even knew I owned. We were in the hallway of the courthouse when he asked it, half joking, half arrogant, like he always did when he couldn't stand not knowing something. What are you going to do without me? He said it like a tease, like it was still 2019, and he could flirt his way through condescension. Like I was still that woman who waited on the couch with reheated leftovers while he made power moves in rooftop bars. I adjusted the strap on my bag and looked him right in the eye. Survive. It was the truth. but not the whole truth. Because I wasn't surviving anymore. I was winning. Quietly.
Strategically.
Ruthlessly. He blinked, the smirk faltering for just a second. I watched the confusion pass through his expression like a glitch in a perfect mask. Something in him didn't know how to process a version of me that no longer needed him, even for the performance. He expected tears. Or, at least hesitation. Instead, I walked away. Straight out of that courthouse and into a waiting car, not a luxury one. Not yet, but one paid for in full by a company credit card under my second business entity. The driver smiled politely. He didn't know who I was. That was the best part. I changed in the back seat, swapped my modest court blouse for a fitted navy blazer, pulled my hair back, wiped away the nude gloss and replaced it with red. I became someone else in that 20-minute ride. Or maybe not someone else, just more of who I had always been when no one was watching. When I stepped into the office, the room shifted. My team stood, greeted me with respect, with expectation. They didn't see a divorcee. They saw their CEO. Boardroom in 5, I said, and they moved. Efficient. Loyal.
Hungry.
We were finalizing a partnership deal that would put us on the map, publicly. Until now, I'd made sure to keep my name behind the brand. Not out of shame. Out of strategy. There's power in invisibility. It gives you the advantage of being underestimated.
But now?
Now I was ready to be seen. The presentation started. My numbers were sharp. The pitch was tighter than my ex's grip on his pride. And when the final slide showed projected growth, the lead investor, a woman who once rejected my ex's proposal years ago, leaned forward and smiled. "This is impressive," she said. "And you built this alone?" I smiled back. Yes. What I didn't say, I built this while he slept beside other women. While he told me I didn't understand markets. While he said I was soft. While he said I was lucky he married me. I built this because I needed something no one could ever take from me again. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the sharp winter air, letting the cold bite through the adrenaline. My phone buzzed. A message. "Unknown number, I miss you.
Can we talk?"
I didn't need to ask who it was. He always texted when his control slipped. He must have realized what I wasn't asking for in the settlement. Must have seen that the name I signed on the documents wasn't the one tied to my digital empire. Maybe someone finally whispered it to him. The connection between the minimalist brand blowing up online and the wife he assumed had nothing going on. He was never good at putting the pieces together until it was too late. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off the phone. Then I opened a second one, the work phone, and answered a call from my head of PR. "They're requesting a founder photo for the launch story," she said. "We don't have anything official." "Send the one from the black blazer shoot," I replied. "It's time." There was a pause on the line. "You sure?" "I'm sure." If he wanted to know what I would do without him, this was it. I would grow. I would lead. I would take everything he once tried to claim as his, and I would outlast him with the silence he never respected. And when my photo finally appeared in the press, next to the words founder,
CEO,
self-made, he would recognize the face. But not the woman. Because she didn't just survive him. She outbuilt him. It was a Wednesday when it happened, quiet, gray-skied, the kind of day that doesn't try to impress you. I was sitting in my office, sipping lukewarm coffee, half listening to a branding meeting when I saw my face on a screen I hadn't prepared. It was a clip. Just a few seconds. A photo from our founder reveal, taken mid-speech, my chin tilted up, red lipstick, eyes clear. The kind of image that says, "I'm here now. Pay attention." It was trending. Not just in niche circles, not just in female entrepreneur forums. It was everywhere. Someone had clipped the moment I said, "I built this quietly so I could never be silenced again," and the internet had grabbed it like a flame in dry grass. It spread. People started connecting the dots. The company name. The interviews I'd given under my pseudonym. The design language that matched my art from years ago.
The timelines.
The mystery of the woman who'd turned nothing into something worth millions. My inbox exploded. So did the press. And somewhere in a condo I used to clean myself after his staff was restructured, My ex-husband opened his phone and saw me. Not the version he married. The one he never thought to look for. I wasn't prepared for how that would feel. The full circle ache of it. The quiet justice of being seen, not through revenge, but through proof. He must have watched the clip a dozen times, trying to convince himself it was a coincidence. But I made sure the reveal was unmistakable. I said my full name, Yara Lin Chen. Not the name he liked to cut short at parties. Not the name he said sounded too old-fashioned for Western investors. The full one. The one I reclaimed the second he stopped using it like a favor.
I didn't hear from him that day.
But I saw the aftermath. A mutual friend texted me a screenshot of a group chat I forgot I was still in. He'd written, "She was always smart. I just didn't think she'd actually do anything with it." That sentence said everything. He thought intellect without dependence wasn't real. He thought power only counted if it wore a tie and stood on a stage next to him. He never considered that I could take everything he overlooked and turn it into something untouchable. I got home late that night, exhausted in the kind of way success rarely shows on social media. My heels were in my hand. My inbox was still buzzing. The congratulatory calls were starting to blur. I sat on the floor of my kitchen and opened a bottle of wine. Poured myself half a glass.
I didn't cry.
I didn't scream. I just breathed.
Because it was done now.
The mask was off. The silence was over. The world knew. And he, wherever he was, whoever he was lying to now, he knew too. He knew that the woman he dismissed as soft had made herself steel. He knew that while he'd been busy hiding failure behind charm, I'd been building something too powerful to ignore. He knew he'd lost me a long time ago. But now, for the first time, he understood what that really meant. I'd been quiet, but I'd never been small. He showed up at my door with flowers. Peonies. White. Full. Expensive. The kind I used to love before I learned they wilt quickly and shed petals like confessions. He must have remembered that. Or maybe his assistant did. I didn't answer the door. I watched from the upstairs window, my fingers curled around the frame, my breath steady. He looked exactly the same and completely different. Same posture, same jawline, same coat thrown over his arm like he was too important to carry it properly. But his eyes were different. They searched.
For mercy.
For nostalgia. For the version of me that might still believe he was capable of softness. He stood there for 7 minutes. Then he left the flowers on the step. The next morning they were gone. Either the wind took them, or someone else needed them more. I didn't care which. A week later, he tried again. Not with flowers this time, but with a text. Saw your interview. You looked beautiful. I always knew you were special. Funny. He used to say I was lucky. Now I was special.
I didn't reply.
He followed it up a day later. Would you have coffee with me? Just to talk. Still no reply. Then he sent the one he must have thought would reach me. You built something incredible. I'm proud of you. I wish I had supported you more. I see that now. I sat with that one longer. Not because I was tempted, but because I knew what it cost him to say it. He wasn't used to apologizing unless he thought there was something left to gain. And he thought there was. He thought the version of me he broke still lived inside this new woman. He thought I built an empire but hadn't learned how to bolt the doors. What he didn't know, what he would never understand, was that I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his regret. I didn't need anything from a man who only saw me once I became unmissable. I saw a post later that week. Him, at a networking event. Arm around a new woman. Blurry smile. Captioned. Starting over. New beginnings. He always was quick to rebrand. Let him have it. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want closure. I wanted distance. And I had that now. Not just in miles, but in identity. The woman he married was gone. And the one who replaced her had no interest in becoming someone's what if. I didn't want his pain. I wanted my peace. So while he played redemption in front of people who didn't know the difference between charm and manipulation, I built deeper. I opened a mentorship program. Quietly. Privately. For women in positions like I'd once been in, too smart, too silent, too stuck. I didn't post about it. I didn't brand it. I just opened the door and said, "Come in." Let him date. Let him reminisce. Let him tell his version of a story where he was the tragic man who loved a woman that outgrew him. I didn't need to correct the record, because the world already knew, because I wasn't at the door. I was already miles ahead, walking towards something new, someone honest, a life that didn't require me to shrink to be safe. He knocked, but I had no home for him anymore. He started showing up in places he never used to belong. The quiet cafe 2 blocks from my new office. The independent bookstore I'd supported since its relaunch. He even popped up once at an event I was sponsoring, blended into the crowd, dressed down, trying to look like he just happened to be there. He never approached me directly. Not anymore.
But I saw him.
And I knew what he was doing. Not stalking. Not exactly. But orbiting. Like if he stayed close enough, long enough, I might feel the gravity again. I didn't. He had become what he once accused me of being, forgettable. Still, he tried. He lingered in proximity. I could feel the weight of his gaze when I stood on stages. I could feel the absence of apology in his silence, and the presence of pride in his regret. He wanted a moment, not to get back together. Not really. He wanted to be part of the narrative, to be remembered as a chapter that mattered. So I gave him what he wanted. I let him keep his pride. I never mentioned him in interviews. I never told the story of the husband who spent more time in boardrooms and bedrooms that didn't belong to me. I never dragged his name into the shine of my spotlight. When they asked about the beginning, I just said, I started small. I had to learn to move quietly at first. And it was true. I didn't need to humiliate him to win. Because the real revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was distance. It was silence. It was being so far beyond needing him that even the idea of resentment felt like a waste of breath. I remember once, years ago, during an argument, he said, "You act like I'm replaceable." I hadn't said anything then. But now, I wish I had. I wish I'd said, "You were never irreplaceable. You were just the first one who got there." And I mistook timing for fate. It would have been cruel, but honest. Instead, I moved on. Truly. I met someone months later. Not in the glamorous way stories like to tell it. Just a quiet encounter in a co-working space during a power outage and shared coffee. He didn't know who I was at first. Didn't care. He wasn't impressed by headlines. He was curious about how I took my tea. Asked good questions. Listened with both eyes. Said nothing when I left the first time without giving him my number. And still found me again, with intention, not coincidence. We started small. I liked that. He didn't ask about my ex. He didn't need the backstory to respect the woman I'd become. That was the difference. He didn't want to own me. He wanted to meet me where I stood. And I didn't flinch when he looked at me. I didn't shrink. I didn't perform. With him, I didn't have to. And maybe that's how I knew I was free. Because I wasn't loving in reaction to pain anymore. I was just loving. And in the background, my ex still floated around the edges. Still liked old photos. Still watched my stories. Still existed in the echo. But I'd stopped listening for his voice a long time ago. Now, I was too busy living in the sound of my own. Somewhere out there, he still tells people he left me. That he walked away when things got hard. That I never really supported his dreams. That I couldn't keep up, couldn't understand the pressure. That I was too soft. Too simple. He spins it well, I'm told. Puts on the voice he used to charm clients, back when charm was enough. He makes himself sound noble, like the man who gave up love so a woman could find herself. The kind of lie that earns him nods of approval and maybe a drink on the house. I let him have that version. Let him keep the script where he gets to be misunderstood instead of selfish. Because the truth? I don't need to correct him. He's already living his consequence. I see it in his eyes the last time I passed him at an airport, him in a wrinkled suit, pretending not to look surprised when he saw me standing in line for first class. I didn't wave. I didn't stop. I just smiled and kept walking. My silence spoke louder than any retort ever could. He didn't even try to follow. I think that was the moment he finally realized whatever we had, whatever he thought was left, it had long since been laid to rest. Now, when people talk about me, they say my name like it's a brand. Not a memory. Not a footnote. They mention the foundation I started, the young women I fund, the team I lead, the way I walk into a room like I'm not asking for permission.
And they don't know about him.
He's just the ghost behind the woman who rose. And that's the justice I never had to ask for. Sometimes I walk past our old building. Not often. Just when the city pulls me back into certain corners. The windows have been changed. The paint's newer. The stories feel farther away. I pause there sometimes, not to mourn but to remember who I was. The girl who believed love meant sacrifice. The woman who stayed quiet to keep the peace. The wife who thought being chosen was the same as being seen. I light a metaphorical candle for her. Not out of pity, out of gratitude. Because she didn't die in that marriage. She waited. She planted. She sharpened her tools in the dark. And when the time came, she stepped out of the ruins and rebuilt herself, stone by stone, truth by truth. So no, I never took revenge. I never burned him down. I simply left and built a kingdom in the silence he mistook for surrender. And now, while he holds onto his pride like it's the last thing he owns, I wake up every morning to everything I built without him. And I don't miss him. Not even a little. Not even at all.